Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how I etch graphics on metal. I'm going to etch this Damascus graphic onto a knife, but first I need to build the knife. So if you want to skip to the etching process, just skip to 1 minute and 25 seconds. So I just used my angle grinder and cut the profile of the knife out of a 1/8 inch piece of 1095 high carbon steel. Once I have the profile all cut out and cleaned up, I'll take it to the belt grinder and grind in the false edge and the bevel. I grind all the surfaces to 400 grit before I do the heat treat. That way it'll be a little easier when I go to do the hand sanding. So I'm going to heat the blade up to 1650 degrees and I'll try to hold that temperature for 10 minutes before I take it to the quench. So I'm not going to do the whole annealing process because this steel was pre-annealed and I did a stock removal, so there's no real need to do the annealing process all over again. I quenched the blade in Parks 50 quench oil, heated up to 120 degrees. And then I did 2 temper cycles at 400 degrees for 1 hour each. After the temper cycles, I'll hand sand the blade up to 1000 grit before I attach any of the vinyl stickers for etching. So now I'm going to etch the Damascus graphic onto the knife. So to cut out my graphic, I used the Cricut drawing machine, and I made sure to use permanent vinyl. That way it'll stick real nice to the metal. So I just searched Google Images for a Damascus graphic, and then I just put it in GIMP, a photo editing software, and then I sized it and mirrored it. That way I can cut it right down the middle, and I'll have a perfect mirror image on both sides of the knife. Then I just use this little pointy thing and weave out all the materials for the background. And so now to transfer the image onto the knife, I'm going to use the Cricut transfer tape. So now I need to clean the surface of the blade really good. So I'll use rubbing alcohol and wear gloves to make sure I don't get any fingerprints or debris on the surface of the metal. I want to make sure that it's really clean and there's no debris, no fingerprints or oils or anything like that. That way that vinyl sticker will stick on there really well and you don't have to worry about any bleed through when you're trying to etch. You'll get nice clean lines. So to make it a little easier to apply the sticker without making any mistakes, I cut out what I need and make sure there's enough of an overlap. That way I know that the spine can get etched as well. There's a lot of little lines and little details to this graphic, so doing it in sections might help if you're having trouble getting everything to come off correctly and in line. But if you can peel it all back in one piece, that would be the best way to do it, in my opinion. So once you have all your graphics in place, it's time to etch the knife. So I'm going to use a battery charger for my power source, and I'll etch it in a salt water solution. You have to have salt in the water for the electrolytes or else it won't etch. You want to hook up the negative to the ground and the positive to the piece that you're trying to etch. I forgot to put some nail polish on the tip of the knife to protect the tip from the etching, so I end up losing the tip, but don't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and put some water in here and then I'll mix the salt in. As far as how much salt you need, I just put some salt in there and mix it up and see how it goes. I haven't had any issues with not enough salt, but I usually try to be a little bit generous. And I always make sure that I dissolve all the salt completely in the water. I made the probe so that way it'll stretch from one side of the knife to the other. I'm trying to get as even of an edge as possible, so I think that helped a lot with it. The amp gauge reads about 2 amps where the probe is now. If I move the probe closer to the knife, there's less resistance in the current and the amp gauge will read higher and it'll etch a lot faster. So after about 10 minutes, I'll take it out and clean up the surface and make sure there's no buildup on there, and then put it back in for another 10 minutes and then check it after that. You always want to make sure you have plenty of paper towels during this process because it does get pretty messy. So now that I've done 2 10-minute rounds, I'm going to check it and see how deep it is and see if it's good. So technically this probably would work fine, but I'm going to go back in for another 10 minutes. However, the water is a little too warm for me, so I'm going to use some ice to cool it down, and then I'm going to do another 10 minutes at 7 amps. I like to keep the water nice and cool, that way the vinyl doesn't want to try and peel up on me. Alright, so now it's been 30 minutes total. I just did the last round of 10 minutes and I'm pretty happy. The etching turned out great. So now I'm going to take all these stickers off of here. I use some rubbing alcohol to help get the stickers to come loose. So now I'll just add the gun bluing and then I'll hand sand the surface up to the 3000 grit and then move on to the handle. Alright, so I'm all done with the blade. If you want to see the whole thing finished and put together, just skip to the end of the video for the final shots, but I'm going to start working on the handle material now. So the wood that I'm going to use is desert ironwood. It's like an orange red wood. I think it looks pretty cool. It should be nice. So now I'm going to drill the 3 holes for the pins. I'm going to do one in the front, one in the middle, and one in the back. Once I have the holes drilled out on the tang, I'll put a pin in the first hole, and then I'll drill the second hole, and then put a pin in, and then do the third hole and put that pin in. Alright, so now that I have all the pins lined up, I'm going to mark where I need to cut out all that extra material with the bandsaw. Cut as much out as I can with the bandsaw, and then I clean it up on the belt grinder, so that way I can get to those lines without going over. Alright, so this handle material was way too much, so I decided to just take one side and rip it down the center, and that turned out to be plenty of material for both sides. I draw some guidelines all around the perimeter and on the top. That way it'll help keep me in line and guide me when I'm doing the bevels. First I just took it to the belt grinder and then I grind out most of the bevels at a 45, and then I'll round everything over once I get the scales glued on. So I hand sand the front all the way up to 3000 grit before I glue the scales on. That way I don't have to worry about that area afterwards because it'll be really hard to get to it. I use clear 5-minute epoxy to glue the scales up. I try to clean as much of the glue up with alcohol as I can. That way I'm not dealing with a bunch of a mess. Once all the glue dries up, I sand the handle up to 3000 grit, and now it's finally done. you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, especially to the end. If you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll definitely get back to you. And if you do like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. That'd be awesome. Thank you.